Alright everyone, I'm going to read a tweet archived, of course, because I no longer really use Twitter except to collate news tips, from Cori Bush, big-time leftist, total goofball. I don't want to unite with those responsible for the insurrection at our nation's capital. I want us to unite in holding them accountable. Interesting. Lots of loaded language there. Number one, it wasn't an insurrection. The idea of insurrection would be that these people actually thought they would be able to permanently occupy the U.S. Capitol, stage a coup, and the U.S. government. That clearly was not going to happen since the protesters there were largely unarmed. As far as this truck full of explosives they found outside, I think it glows in the dark at night, and/or it was wheeled there by Antifa. Which one is more likely? Antifa is doing what Antifa generally does on a normal day, which is build pipe bombs, and it's being used by the MSM as propaganda, or that some crazed MAGA person said, hey, I'm going to storm the Capitol, but I'm going to leave all of the weapons in the car. That sounds like a great idea. I'm beginning to smell a little bit of a rap. Just saying that the story don't make entirely enough sense for me. But it's funny to see the leftists reject the concept of unity. Unity and holding them accountable. Okay, so again, in order to address the concerns of 70+ million people that are really pissed right now, and trust me, that number is not going down, it is rising significantly. I'll explain how. I touched on that in my first video today. Instead of addressing their concerns, you want to make them more concerned by suppressing them more, by abusing them more, by making them feel less enfranchised by the government that they have literally paid for with their tax money, by continuing to further drive a wedge between the left and the right. By the way, at the end of the day, who do you think the average fence-sitting centrist will side with, regardless of the MSM propaganda? The MAGA hat wearer that kind of looks and acts like them and is waving a US flag, or the person who is praising communism? Let me ask you this. You're a regular liberal individual in the middle class. One person says they want to hang you because you've got a rental property, and the other person says they don't want to hang you for owning a rental property. Which one are you probably going to side with? One side thinks that you should be silenced and taxed at 90% for the benefit of being bourgeoisie. They want to steal more of your money and give it to other people. The other side wants largely to leave you the fuck alone. Which one are you likely to side with? When leftists say, well, we reject unity, very well. See how that works out for you. See how it works. Anyway, it's funny because supposedly Trump and his fans, that they're extreme and divisive and they hate everyone, and of course they're genocidal and they hate minorities and gay people and stuff. And yet increasingly you have outright calls for violence from some leftists, creators, activists so-called, even members of Congress. You have no attempt to address the underlying concerns. I'll tell you exactly why this is all happening. Something like 75 million people in the United States feel completely politically disenfranchised right now. As you suppress and censor and kick people that they like and don't find extreme off the internet, and go after websites they might like, and screw around with banking, and as you call Josh Hawley or Joseph Goebbels, and do stupid shit like that, you take people who are not part of that 75 million, who are on the edges of it, or they just don't care about the situation, and you force them to side with those 75 million some odd people. I have no clue over the next few days how many people are going to show up in the state capitals to protest. I can't even begin to estimate it. The Capitol crowd, an initial rally was planned by the Women for Trump. They expected 5,000 to 10,000 people to show up. There had to have been close to 100,000 in the main group alone. If this holds true, and there's no real reason to believe that it won't, I expect that the smallest protests / potential riots at the state capitals to be in the many hundreds of people. That would specifically, ironically enough, Vermont. Probably Alaska too, because things are so remote and spread out there, because it's, it's the size of like a quarter of Russia or something like that. Alaska's land area is so massive, it's a little bit harder to travel, and I think traveling is difficult when you only have one major airport anyway. You have to take your dog sled into the big protest. Your weapon is your fishing spear, your spear gun. You go kayaking in through the fjord. To be clear, I mean, I'm trying to lighten the mood. People do need to calm down a little bit. It would be nice to see the country not torn apart, wouldn't it? It'd be kind of nice to just go back to being calm and not have a bunch of shutdowns and just pretend that all this never happened. Wouldn't that be just? But nobody's going to be willing to do that. The left and right now are in a death spiral, punishing one another. It's sort of like when the Nazis and the communists were sparring in the streets in Weimar, Germany. They fed off of one another. I warned about this, by the way, more than half a decade ago, that what was coming in the political situation in the wake of the GOP, ironically, making its decision with regards to Ron Paul and his libertarian movement. What was clear is that the right and the left at some point were going to offer countering arguments to the mainline public and say, look, the system doesn't work, side with us. So some people join the left, and some people join the right. This is why, by the way, I do support the concept of unity. I do want accountability. I want the leftists held to account for burning down cities for 7 months, and I want the MSM held to account for helping it happen. Beyond that, no, I don't think anyone needs to be punished. I think we need to fucking calm down and go back to being a functional republic. The problem is this. Let's say a group of right-wingers get together. So you've got a small number of people in society that are what we would call further right or even extreme, and a small number that are on the left that are the same way. Socialist, communist, whatever. You've got some fascist movements, you've got maybe hardcore ANCAPs, and some others on the right. These two groups feed on each other and make each other grow. The establishment has no capability to address the underlying concerns of the alienated segment of the population. Meanwhile, the far right and far left are both telling them, side with us and we can help you. The establishment will not. They start growing. The left looks over at the right, and they go to the people who are slightly not far left enough to join up with a communist movement. They go to people who are just social democrats, and they say, well, we may have disagreements, but at the end of the day, look over there. There are more fascists today than there were yesterday, and will be more tomorrow. The jackbooters are rising. You must side with us to defend liberty. And even though they hate liberty, and extremists of both sides tend to in one form or another, they absorb the far left that's not quite extreme left. The right wing looks at the situation, and they'll go up to a monarchist, or they'll go up to someone who's a tradcon, and they'll say, look over there. The left is rising. The communists are starting to absorb millions of people. If you do not side with us, you'll be living under fucking communism. Join us. Yeah, we disagree with each other. You like a Gadsden flag, and I have a swastika on my back. Doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, they hate you for your race, they hate you because you're bourgeois, they hate rent, they want communism. You must side with us to defend liberty. And so both of these sides grow more. Now the establishment is faced with the current dilemma. You have a significant populist movement. The populists are not extreme. What's going to happen, though, is that the more extreme elements that align with the side of the political paradigm they are closer to will begin radicalizing people. The same is happening with the left. There are people out there, milquetoast liberals, being indoctrinated into the concept, helped by the MSM and billionaires, ironically enough, which is why it's arguably quasi-closer to fascism in some senses, and it's a very, very strange ideological creation that we're facing right now. They're being essentially radicalized into supporting groups like Antifa, that build and throw bombs, that openly profess they want to smash the entire system. I still find it funny that there are people on the left that say that all the time, and yet when people enter the Capitol, they freak out and start pearl clutching. So congressional leftists are rejecting unity. It doesn't surprise me. These people don't... The problem is the establishment... When the establishment refuses to represent the population in an era of decadence, it inevitably loses control of the situation. I was hoping, this was my hope, this was what would be good for the country, and there's still a possibility of this. The best thing that can happen right now is a full-on populist takeover of the GOP, or the collapse of the GOP. Fuck what happens to the Democrats, who cares? The collapse of the GOP and its replacement with a patriot movement. A broad tent movement that includes enough moderates so that it's incapable of being radicalized, but is formulaic and reformist enough to change the system so that at least a large proportion of the population will go back to fucking sleep. Why? Because their life will be incrementally improved. The government, for the first time in a long time, could be led by people that actually represent the interests of the average American. A broad tent movement. One that doesn't want billionaires to burn books. One that does not want to steal a huge chunk of your money and piss the economy away with debt spending. One that is more reluctant than the GOP has been, certainly since the Reagan era, to randomly bomb third world nations for no reason. That would be wonderful. Failing that, maybe it happens to the Democrats. If the far left fails in its goals, and especially if the economy picks up, which right now, unfortunately, ain't happening, what could happen is you get a liberal reformist movement. The further left gets pushed out, the problem is they've already become entrenched in some political positions. The same is true on the right. Thankfully, the Republicans should be happy that all they have to deal with is populists. They are not extreme. The concept of people being represented by the government they pay for is not an extremist movement. The concept of making one's country great or putting it first over other countries by necessity is not extremist. The concept of defending your border is not extremism. The concept that a constitutional framework that has held together since the 1700s should be vigorously defended is not extremism. It's only extreme to people who are waving commie flags around. It's only extreme to accelerationist dipshits on the furthest right who really wish that Adolf Hitler was the president. They're sad at Trump. They're mad at him for not being as extreme as the MSM claimed that he was. So, yeah, fucking unity. Yeah, we're not going to get it anytime soon, sadly. There's still a chance to hold things together. But it requires that the GOP or the Democratic Party collapses. I was hoping this would happen in the current election, and I mean, it kind of did, but it's of no effect. It's of no use to us politically. The establishment can't address this problem. All you'll end up doing, you'll end up creating more echo chambers that'll be more and more steeled than ever before and more impermeable. This goes for the right and for the left. It's inevitable. You're not going to be able to suppress your way out of it. There are too many people that are too pissed off. Until the underlying economic and social alienation issues are addressed, both of these sides will continue to rabble-rouse and grow. Thank goodness the bulk of them are not violent people. Because at the end of the day, most of them can make ends meet. But they're under so much stress that they're like one missed paycheck away from joining a strike group. That's about all. Peace out.